The Indian Miss World, and the Rage of Muslims of the World. This book continues the story of the Arab sugar daddy and the beautiful Indian girl, and also the story of the Indian child bride and the old Arab husband. They have been written in English and translated into Arabic by the author Dr. Ahmed. This story resonates with genuine love, strong resilience, and steadfast courage. I invite you to accompany me as I continue narrating the story of the rare, fabulous beauty of the Indian girl, Ifat Khan, and her extremely beautiful mother, Rehana Khan. Before we dive in the tapestry of the story, I would like to remind the reader this novel is narrated in 6 books. 1. The Arab Sugar Daddy and the Beautiful Indian Girl. 2. The Indian Child Bride and the Old Arab Husband. 3. The Indian Miss World and the Rage of Muslims of the World. 4. Christina and the Complete Jew. 5. The Tears of God, Jews, Blacks, and Muslim Women. And 6. The Hidden Life of the Prophet Muhammad. This is an intriguing epic story which exhibits resilience, love, and sacrifice. Book 3. From a Slum Girl to the Queen of the World Beauty. Copyright. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author except by a reviewer, who may quote brief passages from a review for printing in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. All characters in this novel are fictional and any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is merely coincidental. Chapter 26. Prophet is my foot. 3 months after her crowning, Miss Mumbai flew to Bangalore city. Bangalore is host to the national beauty pageant of Femina Miss India. She is, as always, accompanied by her loving mother, Rani Krishna. This annual contest is organized by the Femina Miss India magazine, and 3 beautiful winners are selected to represent the country globally. The first winner will compete in Miss World, the second winner in Miss Universe, and the third winner in Miss Earth. In the past, the magazine used to select a 4th winner to represent the country in Miss Asia Pacific. In 2006, Miss Asia was discontinued, obviating the need for a 4th winner. Among the 3 international beauty pageants, the Miss World contest has the biggest global fan base and always attracts the attention of many feminine groups and viewers. Miss Earth, Miss Universe, and Miss World are 3 beauty pageants that are organized around the world every year. The idea behind these pageants is to identify girls of determination and beauty to represent the country among the international winners and similar perspectives. These beauties are expected to be ambassadors and messengers of goodwill. The winner of the Miss India Earth title represents the nation at a continental level, which is more region-specific. The first winner of Miss World India, on the other hand, represents the nation at an international level, and the platform is similar to that shared by the second winner of Miss India who goes for Miss Universe. The only distinguishable difference between the two is the implication of the terms universe and world. The representative for Miss World is usually filled by the winning contestant at the national level. In contrast, the first runner-up will represent the country in the Miss Universe pageant, and the second runner-up will compete in the Miss Earth contest. The 3 young Indian girls chosen each year are not only beautiful but also committed to representing the rich traditions, culture, and values of India on an international platform. The contestants for Femina Miss India have come from all over India. Each state or region boasts its particularly beautiful representative girl. New Delhi is the only city that has provided a contestant. As the capital city, it is also a district, in much the same way as Washington, D.C. As a matter of fact, on that historical day, Aphrodite Khan had last competed with girls from Mumbai city and other cities in her state such as Pune, Nagpur, and Aurangabad, among other places. Winning the competitive pageant on Memorial Day has given her the honor of being Maharashtra's candidate. From day one, everyone who saw her knew that she was going to be the winner of Miss India. Of course, the centric Mumbai and Bollywood supporters had already predicted her victory as Miss India. There are 3 contestants selected, all of whom could potentially win the pageant. Out of many girls, those 3 extremely beautiful girls are chosen to represent India as Miss World, Miss Universe, and Miss Earth. They hailed from 3 states, namely Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Punjab. Luckily, Miss Mumbai defeated the other two girls, won Miss India, and became a candidate for Miss World. Accordingly, everything went well for the slum girl except for one particularly unexpected incident. It is during a press conference after she is crowned Miss World India. A Hindu journalist, who made it her business to know everything about the new Miss India, asked her what they call in logic a leading question. Such a question is meant to trap the person who answers it. For example, if someone asks you in public, "Have you stopped cheating on your income tax, or have you ceased beating your wife?" Whatever your answer might be, the reply would prove you to be a bad person. The journalist asked Miss India what she would call a man who would marry and sleep with a 9-year-old girl. The question is loaded with religious innuendo and meant to trap the former child bride, Ifat Khan. It appeared that the Indian girl did her homework and came to know in great detail the past life of the abused slum girl. She came to know that the underage girl, Ifat Khan, had been given in marriage to a 70-year-old Saudi geezer when she was a 7-year-old child. She also learned that Aphrodite Khan got kidnapped and raped by the famous Bollywood film director Mahmood Khan when she was 18-year-old. Both the abductors and rapists are Muslims. Even their innocent victim is a Muslim girl. The journalist is a Hindu girl and decided to prove to non-Muslims of India that Islam allows and encourages pedophilia. She understood that the past abusive life of the new Miss India would be a good example to prove her point. Therefore, she began to question her in public and under the camera. So, she rephrased her question again. What would you call a man who would marry and have sex with an underage 9-year-old girl? Aphrodite felt like a dagger had been inserted into her wounded heart. The daring question reminded her of her early years, and in that instant, she began to relive the life she had lived with her Saudi husband. She answered in anger, her words blunt and gritting her teeth, "I will call him my foot." "You mean you will put him under your foot?" "Yes." "But if he said that he had followed the example of his prophet?" "Every man who sleeps with a 9-year-old girl is my foot." "Do you not know that your prophet Muhammad slept with his wife, Aisha, when she was 9 years old, and he was 54? "I don't know that, but if what you have said is true about the Prophet Muhammad, then he is not different from any other evil man who sleeps with a 9-year-old underage girl, and he too will be under my foot." The Hindu girl continued relentlessly to push her agendas. "Even though he is your holy prophet, will you still call him that? Prophet is my foot." In India, when someone says in anger, "Prophet is my foot," it is the same as someone in the West saying in anger, "Prophet is my ass." But if he quotes for you a verse from his religious book which allows him to marry and sleep with a girl who has not yet reached puberty, will you still protest against such a marriage? My reference is in Surah Al-Talaq 65, verse 4. I will spit on a verse that says anything like that. Her Hindu mother Rani Krishna has become incensed at the female journalist. She is manipulating her uneducated and unsophisticated daughter to get her desired answers. Nothing sells magazines like sex and religion. Now Miss India Aphrodite Khan is in a position to be interpreted by Muslims as insulting their infallible Prophet Muhammad and blaspheming against their holy book, the Quran. Swiftly she stepped in and asked the female journalist to stop asking her daughter those religiously charged questions. The Muslim girl Aphrodite Krishna Khan knows truly little about her Islamic religion. She spent most of her life in the captivity of an old Saudi Muslim who kidnapped and raped her from a very tender age. All she knew was that she was a Muslim girl, her prophet was called Muhammad, her religious book is known as the Quran, and her God is Allah. She used to hear her Saudi husband reciting the Quran in a loud voice, especially during the month of Ramadan. While she was living with him, he always prayed 5 times a day. He forced her to fast during the Ramadan months and to pray 5 times daily. He taught her a few short chapters of the Quran and trained her on how to use those verses in her prayers during Ramadan. But after Ramadan was over, he never asked her to pray. He was just interested in her sexy body and raping her. Those answers on the day of her crowning, Miss India, Aphrodite Khan, created fury in the hearts of Muslims. She has been collectively accused by Muslims of blasphemy and is considered to be an apostate from Islam. Some Muslim mullahs and prominent imams of mosques in India and Pakistan called for her death for insulting the infallible Prophet Muhammad and for her attacking their holy Quran. For Muslims of the world, their prophet is sinless, master of creation, and sent by God as a mercy to mankind. They understood that Miss India said their prophet Muhammad had married an underage female child bride at the age of 6 and raped her when she became 9, and hence, he is a despicable pedophile man. For that reason, she said the prophet Muhammad is dirtier than my shoe and he is under my foot. On the following day, Muslims filled the streets of Indian cities calling for the prosecution of Aphrodite Khan. Some of them demanded that she should be dethroned as Miss India and she must be tried, condemned, and hanged to death. Chapter 27. Miss India en route to London. Once more, the abused Muslim girl Ifat Khan alias Aphrodite Khan has been plunged into another series of nightmares of terror. It is no exaggeration to say that almost every Muslim in India wants to assassinate her. Following her triumphant return from Bangalore, she hid and went underground. Her residence requires round-the-clock and 7 days a week police protection. The mother and her daughter have been strictly advised by the police not to venture out of their home. Such advice is backed by serious warnings that if Miss India and her mother disobey the restrictions, they would be killed by Muslim terrorists and their blood would be upon their shoulders. Meanwhile, Muslims throng the city of Mumbai demanding that Aphrodite Khan be hanged for insulting their sinless prophet and Holy Quran. Some Muslims want her to be immediately dethroned and stripped of her Miss India crown. Neither the government of Maharashtra nor the government of India is swayed or intimidated. A great many politicians and lawmen are interviewed extensively on this controversial issue. Some of them admitted that Aphrodite Khan had spoken disrespectfully about the Prophet of Islam and the Holy Quran, but what she said was not against Indian law. It is a personal opinion, and she is entitled to her opinion. They argued that many times some non-Hindu Indians equated the Hindu sacred goddesses with prostitutes, and none were ever prosecuted for their opinions. Dr. Ambedkar, the father of the Indian Constitution, is cited as just such an example. Despite the nationwide protests of Muslims, Aphrodite Khan retained her crown, and the Indian law allowed her to reign as the Queen of Beauty for the year. She is scheduled to fly after 3 months to the United Kingdom to participate in yet another international Miss World pageant in London. In the 3 months preceding the flight, she only went out of her protected residence twice. Once, she appeared at the Mumbai High Court on matters about the lawsuit that her mother submitted against her kidnapper and abuser the late Mahmood Khan. For Miss India's protection, the trial is closed to the public. The court ruled in her favor, and she was granted compensation of 50 crores of rupees, which added 500 million Indian rupees to her bulging fortune. 40 crores for her kidnap, detention, and rape, and 10 crores for her role as a leading heroine in the latest movie directed by her abuser. Mrs. Khan paid the amount reluctantly, adamantly protesting for her being forced by the judge of the High Court to pay compensation to the attacker of their infallible prophet and sacred Quran and to the girl that caused the broad daylight crime committed by her loyal son Javed Khan and the temptress prostitute who caused the suicide of her faithful husband Mahmood Khan. The wife of the so-called faithful husband believed that the victim of her sadist husband is to be blamed for using her extreme beauty, luring her mad son to murder someone and enticing her foolish husband to commit adultery with her, being a filthy, shameless prostitute in Iran and India. When the trial was over and while Miss India was leaving the courtyard, a young Muslim man threw a hand grenade at her car. The grenade exploded a couple of meters behind the car, and Miss India, her mother, their chauffeur, and the car escaped death and damage. Beggars and street children close by are not so fortunate and sustained some serious injuries and deaths. The cowardly terrorist attack on Miss India's car prompted some to suggest to her mother that she should take her daughter and migrate to the West. Rani Krishna announced that she and her daughter were both born in India and they should live and die in Hindustan. The second time Aphrodite Khan stepped out of her house was on a trip from Mumbai to London. For safety reasons, she is provided with a military escort courtesy of the government of Maharashtra. The security at the international airport is at its peak, with the airport practically emptied of all but key workers and personnel. All those authorized to enter have been searched from head to toe before gaining admittance. The international airport has become subject to a police cordon for more than 5 hours until Miss India's plane took off. The passengers of that flight have been carefully searched before they are allowed to board the plane. For the first time, The Mumbai Chhatrapati Shivaji International Airport Authority exercised executive privilege and did not allow any Muslim passenger, either male or female, to travel on the same plane. As soon as the plane took off, Rani Krishna touched the hand of her daughter, assuring her that they had left India safely. She whispered in her ear, saying, "Now we are going to a country where there would be no worry or fear for our lives." Aphrodite felt so happy when her mother assured her that where they were going there would be no fear of terrorists. Rani said to her that in the West, the police departments are efficient, powerful, and skilled, which is why their citizens enjoyed such a high standard of living and full protection. Unlike India, she explained, a person's life is always subject to danger. They are looking forward to moving freely in the capital of Western civilization without the shadow of the threat of Islamic terrorists. As a consequence of her mother's assurance, Aphrodite feels as if she is traveling out of a city full of dangerous and deadly demons and heading to a city full of loving and peaceful angels. She wished that her mother would change her mind and move with her to the West. She just wants to be as far as possible from those who want to kill her, because she spoke in public the truth about the pedophile prophet and the terror-inspiring Quran. Ever since uttering her remarks about Islam, she tried to understand her transgression, which had, in effect, caused every Muslim in India to hate her to the point of calling for her execution. She remembered saying that every man who slept with a 9-year-old girl was under her foot. She remembered adding, in the heat of the moment, "I will spit on a verse which allows a grown-up man to sleep with a small girl who hasn't yet had her period." She asked herself, if Muslims know that their prophet slept with a 9-year-old girl, then why are they angry? Moreover, if there is a verse in their Quran which allows men to sleep with underage girls, then why are they not ashamed of it? Why would they want to kill a person who condemned such a verse? Surah Al-Talaq 65, verse 4. The pedophilia of the Prophet Muhammad is mentioned in the two most authentic collections of his hadiths. The Prophet wrote the marriage contract with Aisha while she was 6 years old and consummated his marriage with her while she was 9 years old, and she remained with him for 9 years, till his death. Sahih al-Bukhari, Book 62, Hadith number 89. Aisha, Allah be pleased with her, reported, Allah's apostle, may peace be upon him, married me when I was 6 years old, and I was admitted to his house when I was 9 years old. Sahih Muslim, Book 8, Hadith number 3310. Aisha herself narrated that, I used to play with the dolls in the presence of the Prophet, and my girlfriends also used to play with me. When Allah's apostle used to enter to us, they used to hide, but the Prophet would call them to join and play with me. Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 8, Book 73, Hadith number 151. This hadith is explained by the renowned Muslim explainer Fateh al-Bari. Playing with dolls and similar images is forbidden, but it was allowed for Aisha at that time, as she was a little girl, not yet reached the age of puberty. Fateh al-Bari, Volume 13, page number 143. These unanswered questions still troubled Miss India when their plane arrived at Heathrow International Airport. When the plane rolled to a stop, Rani Krishna took hold of her daughter's hand, disembarked, and headed to the arrival hall. The two of them remembered their previous visit when no one knew who they were. This time, things are vastly different. Rani knew that as the beauty queen of India, her daughter was going to be received by a special delegate. She expected that the civilized British Indians would come to the Heathrow International Airport to receive Miss India and wish her well. She also thought some of them might come to receive her daughter with garlands of beautiful flowers in their hands and put them around her neck, and some loving Indian girls might print kisses on her cheeks. Many of them might be honored by having their pictures taken with Miss India. Rani is praying to God that her daughter will be crowned Miss World. She is halfway on her road to fulfilling her dreams after winning the titles of Miss Mumbai and Miss India. It all started with a little far-fetched idea that was put into her daughter's head by an Arab man who suggested she try out for the Miss World competition and assured her that she would win what every little girl in the world always dreams of. Chapter 28. Misuse of freedom of speech in the West. The Hindu mother Rani Krishna and her Muslim daughter Aphrodite Khan, who is the current Miss India, walked inside the arrival hall at Heathrow International Airport with their heads held high. As soon as they stepped outside the airport, followed by 3 British police officers, they were assaulted by a group of British Muslims, many of the Indians. Their faces and clothes have been rained with rotten eggs and other spoiled vegetables. Aphrodite's face has been fully covered in foul-smelling eggs and spoiled tomatoes. She clutched her face and began to cry. The Muslims continued to throw eggs and rotten vegetables at them. The British police could not prevent the thousands of Muslim protesters who had gathered outside the airport from venting their anger and insane viciousness. To defuse the situation, the police pulled Aphrodite by the hand and took her back inside the arrival hall again. Her Hindu mother has become shocked at the breach and lack of security. She realized that anyone in the angry mob of Muslims could potentially have a knife or a gun, and they would not stop until they had killed her daughter in front of the police. Muslims in London ironically have more freedom to terrorize people than in Muslim countries. This quirk has to do with freedom of expression. Oddly, Muslims denounce non-Muslim governments and societies but flock to immigrate to non-Muslim countries where they can enjoy personal liberties not available in their homelands. When British troops returned from Iraq, British Muslims received them at the airport with words of condemnation. They were called cowards, rapists, terrorists, butchers, and murderers. They shouted for them all to go to hell, where their fallen brethren of British comrades were already burning in the flames of hellfire. Recently, British Muslims openly challenged the London police and shouted on their faces, "British police, go to hell." Looking at the number of Muslim protesters who came to berate and condemn the beauty queen of India for insulting their prophet and deriding their holy Quran, the crowd is 10 times larger and 100 times angrier than those in front of the High Court in Mumbai. Rani Krishna preferred to take her daughter and return to her country rather than walk out of London International Airport without enough police protection to face a mob. Scenarios of someone firing a bullet from his concealed pistol or splashing burning acid on the face of Miss India crossed her mind. She said a short prayer of thanksgiving to her God that none of the protesters fired a bullet at them and that they were not stoned to death just for being alive. At first, the angry mother asserted that her daughter Miss India should not spend another minute on British soil and demanded that the same airplane that brought them has to take them back to India immediately. She asked the 2 female representatives of the beauty pageant who had come to receive Miss India, how could they allow her daughter to be attacked by a bunch of heathens, endure unprovoked violence, and suffer humiliation and death threats. She bristly stood her ground, loudly voicing her dissatisfaction at the fact that only 3 British police officers had been sent to receive and accompany them to their destination. Rani changed her mind when the British officers summoned the necessary reinforcements and seemed to have gotten the upper hand and brought the situation under their control. The British police did not expect Muslims to come to the airport on the day the Miss India contestant arrived. No one announced her arrival, and hence the police did not anticipate any well-wishers to show up at the airport. It is clear that the Muslims and Indian citizens have access to good intelligence and have received information from their friends and relatives in Mumbai about the beauty queen's arrival. It is also obvious some of the leading British imams sounded the alarm and instigated the uprising by urging their congregations to go to the international airport and protest the blasphemy allowed in the land of infidels. That day, the adopted Muslim daughter Aphrodite Khan, her Hindu mother Rani Krishna, and the 2 British female receptionists are escorted out of the Heathrow International Airport with more than 30 police officers. The police created a human barricade to protect Miss India and her entourage. As they left the airport, the frightened Hindu mother and her terrified Muslim daughter saw the Muslim protesters carrying signs and placards with condemning inflammatory words. "The dirty to waif of Bollywood, she should go to her homeland. Death to the filthy woman who ridiculed our beautiful religion and holy prophet. Death to Miss India. Islam will dominate the world. Death to the apostate Muslim woman, the ugly Miss India." Some protesters have ugly caricatures and funny effigies of Aphrodite with placards reading, "Aphrodite Krishna is not a Muslim woman. Miss India is the high-profile prostitute of Bollywood." While she was in a prison in Mumbai, Aphrodite sold her body to tens of police officers and had committed adultery with many top government officials. Miss India is an Iranian. Miss India is a Hindu pretender. The shoe of our holy prophet Muhammad is better than the face of Miss India. Death to Aphrodite Krishna Khan. Walking through the surging crowd, abusive insults rained upon the new Indian beauty queen. Boarding the bus that was to take them to the hotel, they watched as the crowd of angry bearded men and scary veiled women in black burqas surrounded the bus and battered it with their hands, chanting rhythmically, as if in a religious trance. The mother and her daughter Aphrodite began to panic. Their eyes darted all over the crowd, expecting one of them to toss a hand grenade through the glass windows or for a suicide bomber to gain entrance to the bus. Even in Mumbai, Rani and Aphrodite had never experienced such a raw display of hatred and violence. They had never been exposed to an organized mob such as this. Rani regretted listening to the London police, and now her daughter is in mortal danger. Trying to save her daughter from the worst of it, she tried to hide her fear and downplay the events unfolding around her, hoping her daughter would not go berserk. She is shocked that despite the terrorists attacking the bus and the threats written on the banners that called for the murder of Miss India, the police of London did not make any arrests or have the offensive banners removed. She knows that in India such banners would surely result in the Mumbai police arresting the perpetrators and torturing them for inciting the murder of an innocent female citizen. But the UK police officers are powerless to act given the provisions of personal freedom to protest and the ideal of freedom of speech. It seemed to the rich Hindu woman Rani Krishna that unless someone killed or maimed Miss India, the police of London would just sit on their rumps and protect the constitutional rights of British Muslims to threaten to kill an innocent human being. Even in mayhem, the irony and hypocrisy have not escaped the notice of her shrewd mind. Therefore, she decided to expose publicly in the Indian media such as hypocritical and terrorist misuse and abuse of freedom of speech in Europe as soon as they returned safely to their motherland India. Chapter 29. The emergency meeting before the beauty contest. That day, when they reached the hotel, Rani Krishna was at a loss as to the treatment afforded the reigning Miss India upon her arrival in London. She simply could not understand the philosophy behind allowing British Muslims to terrorize people they disagree with. After all, her experience with Muslims has taught her that Muslims are simply unable to agree to disagree. Every real or imaginary slight will cause the Muslims to seethe and plan retribution. Above all, she wants to know why they are allowed to abuse the laws of the country they are living in. The laws protecting free speech are supposed to enhance and preserve the safety of people and not allow them to be terrorized. The London police should not allow one segment of the population to malign their laws in the name of freedom of speech so that they can terrorize law-abiding citizens for expressing their opinions. Even in Muslim countries, Muslims are denied the right to assemble and air their grievances like this unless specifically sanctioned by the authorities. Just to name a few: Egypt, Libya, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Somalia, Sudan, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, among others. As the bus reached their hotel, Rani was flabbergasted to know that there would be no special police protection for Miss India. Miss India, she has been advised, that she is going to be treated like any other female contestant. There will be no special police task stationed at the hotel, and they have received no instructions to mobilize any anti-terrorism squads. The hotel, on the other hand, has its security guards, and that is the only protection Miss India can expect. Her mother Rani reminded the contest officials that their arrival was a sling fest of rotten eggs and spoiled produce by angry bearded men and scary veiled women. She demanded to know if the pageant organizers or the hotel had any security measures and contingency procedures in place to deal with bomb threats, or potential gunmen and hazardous materials like sulfuric acid. Her argument is simply that all female guests are at risk from religious fanatics. The representative stressed it is beyond their capacity to deal with this sort of issue. She contacted the London Police Force and Scotland Yard to ask for a special security team to protect Miss India. Once again, the authorities denied their request, explaining that they had not received any requests from either the Government of India or the Indian Embassy asking them to dispatch a security detail. Therefore, the London police do not seem obliged to ascribe extra protection police force for what is essentially an international and completely Indian problem. When her request was denied once again, she contacted the Indian Embassy in London with the same request. Unfortunately, the Indian ambassador happened to be a Muslim man, and he flatly rejected the request because he received no such instructions from the government of Maharashtra state in Mumbai or the central government in New Delhi. He too knows what the apostate Muslim girl Aphrodite Krishna Khan had said about his so-called infallible Prophet Muhammad and his holy Quran when she was crowned Miss India in Bangalore city. Therefore, he is the last person on earth who can be expected to lend a helping hand in such a situation. When neither the London police nor the Indian embassy was ready to provide protection, the Hindu mother opted to cancel the mission and withdraw Miss India. She mused, with some satisfaction, that her Mumbai house has a sizable police detail 24 hours a day and 7 days in a week. Always a special task force is allocated to every Miss India residence in the past. One of the contestants broke the awkward silence and suggested that Rani should not deprive her daughter of what will surely be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, only given to a very select few girls. She reasoned that London is home to world-class security companies like G4S, which can provide Miss India better protection than the city police. They are exhaustively trained to protect the lives of their clients. Of course, they will insist on changing all the routines of their client and utilize risk profiling to make it much more difficult for threats to materialize. The only thing she has to do is to pay through the nose. Rani welcomed the idea and said she is prepared to pay any amount of money to ensure the safety of her beloved daughter, who proudly has become Miss India. The beautiful contestant who wisely advised Rani and Aphrodite happened to be Miss Israel. She has special highly efficient bodyguards to protect her from the Palestinian terrorists of Hamas and other Muslim terrorists. The contestant checked the phone book and found several private security companies. After conducting phone interviews and asking for their procedures and policies, Rani decided upon 4 very experienced and highly trained bodyguards for her daughter's protection. Paying top dollars, she requested armed guards, primed with all the latest equipment. Each guard is going to cost her thousands of euros a day, but Rani feels a little more secure knowing that the 4 bodyguards will always be with her daughter, always. With their arrival, the professionals made many changes, one of which they wholeheartedly agreed to was outsourcing all of Miss India and her mother's food. Rani is already a step ahead of her guards, driven by an extremely healthy distrust of the hotel staff. She has already spotted angry bearded men and ghost-like scary girls with Islamic hijabs on their heads among the staff. She recognized them as Asian and Arab Muslim immigrants. So, she simply will not allow her daughter to eat any food offered by hotel staff. It is free of charge, but she told the hotel restaurant not to send any food or drink to the room of Aphrodite Khan or Rani Krishna. She said that she is going to provide cooked meals for her daughter. From that day on, Rani is to be escorted by one of her security bodyguards so that she can buy food from restaurants, never using the same restaurant more than once. She does not want to give any of the Muslims a chance to breach the protocol that her security teams have Southwest painstakingly put in place for their protection. The mother does not need to tell them that all casual and unclear visitors should not be allowed to enter their hotel room. Even the housekeeping crew is not exempted from this rule. Soon, mother and daughter started changing their bed sheets, straightening their rooms, and scrubbing their bathrooms. Meanwhile, the protests of the British Muslims naturally drew the attention of the media. Journalists swarmed the lobby of the hotel where all the potential Miss World contestants were accommodated. Every one of them tried to talk to Miss India. Rani Krishna and her security team have not allowed them access to Aphrodite Khan. Denied the opportunity to interview Miss India or her entourage, the media switched their focus to the easily accessible Muslim protesters who are more than willing to make statements and voice their discontent. Those interviewed took advantage of an unchallenged platform and constructed their grievances based on half-truths, concentrating on the incendiary statements of the pretty and docile Miss India maintaining she is a vehement bigot, and it was witnessed on national television that she called their gracious Prophet Muhammad her foot and she spit on the Holy Quran. Taken out of context, with no rebuttal from Miss India, the media construed her silence as an admission of guilt and implied consent to report the facts as presented. The resultant media campaign played right into the hands of the Muslims. London media people have not bothered to research her abusive past life history, so it came to pass that the British media blamed the victim rather than the culprit, the kidnapped rather than the kidnapper, the abused rather than the abuser, and they also put the blame on the raped victim rather than blaming and condemning her evil rapist. A question in the headlines grew momentum and eventually, the public began to demand that Miss India be ejected from the competition. The consensus is that it is highly unseemly for the female crowned representative of a multiracial and multi-religious country to ridicule Islam and hurt the religious sentiments of more than 1.5 billion Muslims around the world. Numerous calls and letters demanded her disqualification because the eventual winner of the Miss World title should carry her title on an international platform. She is supposed to be a female ambassador of goodwill. Her duties will include traveling during her reign and advocating peace and equality for women, leveraging help for the poor, and fighting against the oppression of women and abuse of children. How can such a malign young woman perform those duties? In an emergency meeting, the judges of Miss World pageant rejected the notion because they did not have proof to justify her expulsion. However, both the organizing and the judging committees collectively agreed that Miss India should be queried during the interview segment. Their list of questions frightened around the questions they all wanted to ask of her. Why did you call the Prophet Muhammad my foot? Why did you spit on the Holy Quran? Desperate to avoid a scandal, they conspired to have her say on camera, and to the entire world, exactly what she had said in India. If things go their way, she will incriminate herself and leave the organizing committee with no option but to disqualify her. Problem solved. Once disqualified, she should be barred from ever again participating in any international beauty pageants, including Miss World, Miss Universe, and Miss Earth. The organizing committee and the judges prepared what is known in symbolic logic, a series of leading questions for Miss India. A leading question is a tricking question that always implies the person answering the question. For example, if someone asks you, "Have you stopped cheating on your taxes?" The only way to escape unscathed from this form of questioning is not to answer. Not answering a question is not an option for any of Miss Worlds. It is not an option for any Miss World to remain silent on stage. Along the same line of thought, once again the questions prepared for Miss India are, why did you call the Prophet of Islam my foot, and why did you say, I will spit on the holy book of Muslims? The judges know that there will be no possible justification that Miss India can give to justify her evil actions, and no one will oppose the committee and the judges when they announce her disqualification. Chapter 30. Let Muslims throw their rotten eggs at their prophet. The beauty contest began with 99 contestants from 100-1 country. In the first round, the contestants were evaluated based on the beauty of their faces and shapes. This round eliminated 84 contestants. The remaining 15 beautiful girls advanced to the next round where they were judged in swimsuits. From that round, 10 of the best candidates must be selected to move on to the evening dress competition. The semi-finalists must be narrowed down to 5 finalists. The 5 girls will be asked to answer a question posed to them by the judges. Their answers will determine next year's Miss World. To avoid lengthy details and descriptions, we will jump straight to the final day. The 5 finalists are Miss Venezuela, Miss USA, Miss Lebanon, Miss Israel, and Miss India. All 5 finalists are very charming and have exceptionally beautiful faces and very sexy bodies. The judges have their work cut out for them, as it's impossible to pick a winner just by looking at the girls. Visually, any one of the pretty girls will be fit to win the crown. The next stage was tasked with choosing just one, which was to expand the concept of beauty in character, knowledge, intellect, and the human skill set. It seems that the candidate with the least flaws in the Q&A section will ascend to the throne. The 5 finalists must choose a judge blindly or randomly, and that judge must ask them a question. They will be given envelopes containing the names of the judges concerned. The nature and type of question is entirely within the judge's prerogative. Except for Miss India, whose question was prepared in advance. The committee has already taken it upon themselves that if Miss India reaches this level, they will have to expel her from the competition and send her home with the disgraceful exposure of notoriety for being a disrespectful and malicious girl. The top 4 finalists were asked direct questions. He asked one of the girls a question about the preferred qualities of a life partner. However, another was asked what she would do for women if she were crowned Miss World. The third girl was asked an easy question about the geography of the world, and the fourth girl was asked a question about the history of her country. When all the other beautiful contestants answered their questions, the audience focused their attention on the scandal-ridden Miss India. The judge she chose randomly from the ballot box is an American woman. For the past 3 months, Hindu mother Rani Krishna has appointed a highly qualified and skilled coach to train her Muslim daughter, Aphrodite Khan, who is nominated for Miss World. Even the doting mother herself spent long hours coaching Miss India on how to know and answer the questions expected in the beauty pageant. With a special focus on interview questions, the trio of coaches, daughter, and mother cover hundreds of potential questions and scenarios. None of the three expected the question at hand, and before Miss India could even begin to answer it, mumbles and grunts indicated that the audience had already written her off. The judge began her question with a short introduction in which she said, "The incident at Heathrow International Airport, where thousands of angry British Muslim protesters pelted you with rotten tomatoes and rotten eggs, raises many unanswered questions. Today, the panel would like to ask you a direct question. Before I ask my question, I would like to remind you and the audience of a situation that happened in Nigeria when the 2002 Miss World competition was moved to London because a Nigerian journalist said, if only he were alive today, the Prophet Muhammad would choose a wife from among the contestants. This statement angered Muslims in Nigeria and led to riots and violence throughout the turmoil-torn country, resulting in the deaths of more than 100 innocent civilians. From what we learned from that bitter experience in your position, why then did Miss India insult the religious feelings of 1.5 billion Muslims around the world when she called their holy Prophet Muhammad my foot and threatened to spit on their holy Quran? Miss India made her coach proud that day, as she answered the question with poise. After a moment of recollection, she replied, "To answer your question, I must narrate my personal experience." My answer was taken out of context. First, I deny that I said that the Prophet of Islam is my feet or my shoes, and I did not spit on the Holy Quran for Muslims. I would like to remind you and everyone watching me that I was born and raised as a Muslim girl, and no sane person in the whole world would dare to spit on his holy book. Having said that, in my country, after I was crowned Miss India in Bangalore, a journalist asked me an impromptu question. She asked me what I would call a man who married and slept with a 9-year-old underage girl. Later I learned that I should have asked her to clarify her question. I assumed she was asking me a hypothetical question about a certain type of man. At no time did you indicate that the question you asked related to the Prophet Muhammad. My personal experience as a child had exposed me to sexual abuse and rape under the pretext of Islamic child marriage, hence her question was too emotional for me to answer. Please allow me to express these things. When I was a 7-year-old girl, I had to marry an old, 70-year-old Saudi man named Sheikh Fayez bin Ahmed. Over the next 3 years, he imprisoned me in a house in the city of Asmara, the capital of Eritrea, and harassed me continuously for a year through an evil Arab practice they call child bride trapping. At the age of 9, he started raping me. At the age of 11, she became pregnant with his child. During that period, the Eritrean police freed me from his home and returned me to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. When I returned to Jeddah, a group of white people filed my case in the Sharia court and tried to annul my marriage to the old man. But the Sharia court in Jeddah rejected their appeal and ruled in favor of the old man, which forced me to return to him. This time, he took me to Iran where I was imprisoned as a child bride for the next 7 years in his home in Tehran, suffering from his brutal rape almost every day. Wait a minute, please. The American judge who asked Miss India the tough question exclaimed, "Do you have a name other than Aphrodite Betrayed?" Yes, I have another name, but I officially changed it because my birth name reminds me of my abuse, in my childhood, through kidnapping and rape. Was your name then like Afaf Khan or Irfan Khan? My name was Ifat Khan. Now I know who you are and who you're talking about. I was one of the white people you just mentioned. A task force of 7 American CIA agents is sent to Saudi Arabia to investigate the murder of a young American woman whose father-in-law was a senator. I am now a retired woman, and the case has already been declassified. It was a coincidence that during our investigations in Jeddah, we came across your case. Needless to say, we took your case to the highest authorities in Saudi Arabia, but as I mentioned, our appeal was rejected. The Sharia court in Jeddah has ruled that your husband marrying a 7-year-old girl without the consent of the child bride is legal in Islam. We are also told that this practice is justified based on the marriage of the Prophet Muhammad to his 6-year-old child bride, Aisha. After exhausting all legal avenues, we had to accept the fact that we could not save you from your abusive Saudi husband. Our only consolation is that after the old Saudi man flew you to Iran, we succeeded in saving your imprisoned mother. She was sentenced to death by stoning and was falsely accused of being a prostitute, who had 3 husbands at the same time. Did you say you managed to save my mother from being stoned to death? Yes, we did. Miss India started crying and said, for 12 years, I told myself that my mother was a bad woman who was executed for her crimes of being a prostitute and a thief. It was my 70-year-old Saudi husband and his 4th wife who told me about my mother's crimes. That wasn't true. Your mother was an innocent woman who was falsely accused and unjustly convicted by a group of fanatical Islamic clerics who claimed to be judges in the Sharia court in the city of Jeddah. She became pregnant through a gang rape by 2 Saudi policemen. We have been able to prove with a DNA paternity test who is the evil Arab police officer who raped your mother and made her pregnant through gang rape. Where is my mother now? After her acquittal, she returned to India. I remember that our team was instructed to provide humanitarian assistance to her and her young child as Indian refugees resettled in the USA, but she insisted on returning to her other children in Mumbai. I am incredibly grateful to you and your American group for saving my Muslim mother from the hands of these cruel Arab judges. In my experience, many of these Arab men treat women as worthless, with little respect, and consider their needs unworthy of attention. They all view women as fresh meat, and their God has given them the right to eat them wherever they are. Anyway, within this frame of reference, I answered the question that the Hindu journalist asked me in my home country after I was crowned Miss India in Bangalore. My answer to the question remains the same. I still curse any homosexual man who exploits a helpless child and rapes her under the pretext of Islamic marriage for permissible female children. Miss India continued with a heavy heart. The journalist also asked me to comment on the scenario. She explained that if the men used the defense that child marriage was allowed and approved by the Prophet Muhammad, what would my response be? I simply repeated my previous answer saying that I would also curse any man who married and slept with a 9-year-old girl. The Hindu journalist was not satisfied with my answer, but she reminded me that there is a verse in the Quran, in Surat Al-Talaq 65, verse 4, that permits an adult man to marry a minor girl before she reaches puberty. I immediately told her that if there was such a verse in the Holy Quran, I would spit on that verse. I was speaking figuratively and at no point did I spit on the Muslim holy book or do anything like that on camera. I must conclude by saying that I am not sure whether the Prophet of Islam slept with a 9-year-old child girl or not. I say to the august jury, the esteemed audience, and the entire world, that if the Prophet Muhammad really married and slept with a 9-year-old girl, then he is at my feet, and if there is a verse in the Quran that allows a man to marry and sleep with an underage girl, I will spit on that verse. Even if I don't win Miss World, and even if I go from here straight to prison and are found guilty and hanged to death, I will not take back my words and I will not apologize to Muslims who think otherwise. If Muslims want me to retract my words and apologize to them, let them first announce and condemn the teachings of Sharia law that permit the harassment and rape of underage girls under the pretext of marriage. Let them condemn their prophet because he married a 6-year-old girl named Aisha and raped her when she became a 9-year-old girl, and gave his followers license to do the same to underage girls all over the world, especially in Arab and Islamic countries. Under the pretext of legal female child marriage in Islam, hundreds of child brides in the Middle East, North Africa, and other Islamic countries are being raped daily by male adults. I am one of the victims of these unfortunate children. If they offend my words, let them tear out the offending pages from their holy books of the prophetic hadiths of Muhammad, and erase a verse from their holy Quran, in Surat Al-Talaq 65, verse 4, which allows the institutional sexual exploitation of children and rape of minor children. Let them condemn the Sharia court in Jeddah for recognizing that I was married without my explicit consent, and that my consent was not needed for the marriage contract. Let them condemn the Saudi Muslim men who raped and impregnated me when I was 11 years old. If they are offended by my words, then I am also offended by the system that robbed me of my childhood to satisfy the perverted sexual desires of an old man, to suffer seeing things a little girl should never see, to experience brutality and physical abuse. Many times, to the point of death, I almost died from childbirth because I was not taken to the hospital. I am not the only victim of these atrocities. My husband, an imitator of his prophet, was arrested at Mumbai International Airport because he married and raped an 11-year-old minor Indian Muslim girl from Hyderabad known as Amina Haider Ali. He was 80 years old at the time and was murdered by a fellow prisoner when he bribed all the arbitration parties involved, and it looked like he would walk free from the Mumbai High Court chamber with his head held high in honor. Ladies and gentlemen, now that you have heard the story of my childhood, and what so-called godly men did to me, and after so long being deprived of my free will and my right to choose, I now choose to stand by my previous statement, without fear or favor. In memory of the countless child brides who suffered and died, and in honor of the brave Christian prisoner who gave his life in support of justice, to those who saw fit not to acknowledge me as a person when I was a sex object, but now see me as their enemy, I now dedicate my life to speaking on behalf of those who cannot do so. To those who threw me and my innocent mother at Heathrow Airport, I now challenge them to throw their rotten eggs at their prophet Muhammad and smash their rotten tomatoes on their Quran, if they have living consciences. And this, honorable judges, ladies, and gentlemen, must remain my answer to you and to anyone else who may ask me the same thing. Thank you all. As Aphrodite Khan finished her answer to what was now the longest answer ever to a beauty pageant question, a dead silence fell over the hearts of the judges and the 4,000 spectators like a heavy blanket. No one seemed to want to be the first to acknowledge or challenge her determination. The lady at the party was stunned by the inaction. The wall of silence was broken when suddenly a sound of applause pierced the hall. It is none other than the American judge who immediately put Aphrodite Khan to the test. A wave of applause followed, and in a short time, the entire hall was clapping in unison. By this time, the American judge had already stood on her feet, as the first to be honored with a standing ovation. The audience, just coming to terms with the enormity and scale of her answer, rose to their feet as well. They probably would have continued their applause if they had not seen the judge walk up to Miss India and hug her, both of them shedding hot tears of emotion. On that historic night, Aphrodite Krishna Khan's innocent dreams became a reality, and the world now had a new Miss World, as an ambassador of goodwill.